Computer.
And we're recording too.
And here we go. Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Brilliantly Resilient live show with Kristin, and I'm Kristin, and we have Mary Fran. And we have been jumping right in and helping all of you as we are all collectively, globally, trying to figure out how to reset, rise, and reveal our brilliance, which is a new concept for a lot of folks that Mary Fran and I had just been about to launch our world tour, meaning in person. And now, lucky you, everyone around the world gets to see us here on Facebook and all of our other platforms. So we are going to dive in today we think that we're probably going to spend a lot of time, we were talking before we came on, about the resetting part of a journey in resilience, because if you guys are like us, which judging by all the posts and stuff all over social media, everyone is trying to get their heads around this and how to move forward. So we have one of our newest friends, Charles. Charles, tell me how you say your last name.
Solis.
Okay. Charles Solis, who is when Mary Fran and I go back and forth about when we refer to Charles, you're in, I think you're even in my phone as the brain guy.
The brain guy. That's how we talk about you, the brain guy.
And because Charles was at our launch event for Brilliantly Resilient. We had connected, I think, over LinkedIn initially. Correct. And we have a mutual friend in rare diseases. Like, it's bizarre how our network is really it's like the Kevin Bacon thing, but only about 2 degrees of separation from so many people. And we went to lunch before our live launch and had the most incredible conversation about the brain and the function of it and its role in resilience. So I'll stop there. And Charles, why don't you give I know that you've had a journey that's extraordinary. So trim it down to a couple of cool points to let folks know just how brilliant you are.
Well, you're far too kind. First, thank you so much for having me on. This is a delight. We had an absolute blast over lunch about a month or so ago, and I truly think we could have gone all weekend. We'll try not to do that today. So, well, my wife and I work together. We've actually worked together longer than we've been married, and we've been married for 40 years.
Wow.
And yeah, the focus of our work is the human brain, how it develops, and really sharing that message, sharing that knowledge with families, with parents of children who are little babies, so that, the parents are aware of how the brain develops and why it's important. It really is the most important piece of equipment we all come into the world with. And if it's properly developed, then, the sky's the limit. Who knows what potential any of us have. And then the work also involves, and it's been a very big part of our work, working with families who have children who have difficulties in development. Children whose brains are injured, either in the developmental process or in delivery, sometimes neurological problems because of genetic issues. So we have a lot of experience working with children with difficulties. And boy, you want to talk about the need for resilience. Kristin, I don't need to tell you about that, especially with regard to developing children. Your story is pretty extraordinary, and you too, Mary Fran. Even though yours was not a baby when it all happened.
True.
He's still your baby. And,
yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because I don't know that we think of how drugs and heroin and things like that affect the brain. I mean, we think of it, but it's an afterthought, because you're dealing with the immediacy of the trauma and all that. But when we were at lunch, you used a word that just has stuck with me, and you talked about the plasticity of the brain.
Yeah.
Meaning what? And then I wanted to kind of throw something else in there. So tell us what that means.
Yeah, I think before I jump into that, I think that resilience applies to the human condition really on 3 levels. The first is the most central level, and that's the human brain. So I'll talk about that and answer your question. In addition to that, it also applies to human beings as a species, because it's really the hallmark of the human species is our adaptability, which is, in a real sense, another way of saying resilience. And then finally, it also applies to the human family. So we kind of start in close with the brain, then the human being himself, and then his closest community, the family. And we see resilience played out at all of those levels, and then later on at a wider community level. Anyway, so the brain. One of the most extraordinary things about the brain is that there is this phenomenon that we call brain plasticity or neuroplasticity. And basically the idea there is that the human brain changes. The reality is it's constantly changing. And it does so in response to stimulation that's coming in from the environment. The use of motor abilities. So, my talking right now, and your talking, waving our hands, all of those are motor functions. And that plays a role in the plasticity of the brain. And then finally, the third condition or factor that's required is adequate nutrition. But if we have those three things, the human brain changes. It's that simple. Now, we didn't always believe that was so. When my wife and I began doing our work, gee whiz, 40 plus years ago, 45 years ago for me, anyone that talked about neuroplasticity was considered a heretic, because at that time, the standard dogma in the medical field was that, the human brain was what it was. And if you were lucky enough to be born with a brain that was good, healthy and good, well, good for you. You got aces, and you were going to do well. If you were unlucky enough to be born with a brain that was not in good shape, or if you're unlucky enough to have a good brain damaged, well, then too bad. Sorry, nothing can be done about that. And that was pretty much the case for many, many years. I mean, probably the first 20 years of my career. That was essentially what was believed. And then really what changed it was scanning technology that was being used in neuroscience research. So with the invention of CAT scans, PET scans, and later MRI scans, which is essentially the marriage between X-ray technology and computer technology, once we had that, then it finally became possible to actually look at the brain, and in the case of functional MRI scans, to be able to look at the brain literally in live time while it's functioning. So we then had the possibility of doing that in a non-invasive way. Before
so then they could see how the brain was not where they thought it wasn't functioning or wasn't working in certain areas or whatever, that it was, and that where they show you that area is lit up and it shouldn't be, like that kind of a thing. So I'm dumbing this down because that's my understanding of what you're saying, that when they could see that.
Yeah, that's one part of it. The other part of it, though, is that you could do scans at different points in time. So let's say, you could scan a child every 6 months for 3 years, and then you can compare the scans, and you can see very, very clearly that there has been structural change in the brain. And that's most impressive when you're looking at at the brain of a child where the brain is damaged. Because previously it was believed that there was simply nothing you could do about that.
And I would assume that those scans that you're talking about in research like that, you were doing interventions all along the way, and then measuring the activity.
Yeah, that's certainly what we did. We once had an experience with a child who had convulsions, and the doctors had tried everything, anticonvulsant medication, you name it, they had tried it. All to no avail. So he was having a lot of convulsions. And of course, the risk there is that there can be more damage to the brain. Mm-hmm. And so they finally decided, after quite a while, to perform surgery on his brain And it's a surgery that had not really been done in many, many, many years, called a hemispherectomy, where they split.
Oh, I think I remember this. They literally removed
Yeah.
a half of the brain,
Yes.
but with the assumption that that would also remove function.
Exactly.
And then it didn't happen that way, right?
Well, in this child, yeah, actually, it depends. It depends.
Okay.
It depends on what one does with the child in terms of rehabilitation. But with this kid, what was fascinating was that they did him his hysterectomy, and knowing that he was going for surgery, the family decided to schedule their appointment with us after the surgery. So he went and had surgery, recovered, and then came to see us. And we did our thing. We gave him a program that the family did at home. And then 6 months later, he went back to the neurosurgeons. This was at UCLA. And they did scans to see what his brain was looking like. He was functioning. He was doing much, much better. Seizures had dramatically decreased, virtually been eliminated. And he was developing. He was really progressing nicely. So when they did the scans, the surgeons were absolutely stunned to see literally the structural change in his brain. So not only was he functioning better, but his brain was literally different
and was adapting.
Yeah, and so
that brings us to, I guess, to the applications for all of that with where we are now in the world.
Sure. So neuroplasticity is the key to the brain's resilience. And you know, we live this day in and day out. We have, you know, over 40 years worked with, thousands and thousands of children who, you know, if it were not for the fact that their brains are plastic, that they can be molded, that they adapt based on experience, which one could say is a certain form of resilience, you know, they'd be lost. And so, you know, we have that sort of automatically, we all have that built into our system. And, you know, I'm talking about children, but, you know, all of these same things apply to adults too, including the elderly. You know, one of the greatest researchers who studied the human brain was a woman at UC Berkeley, Marion Diamond. And one time when asked Marion Diamond what she had learned in her career of research, her answer was very, very simple. She said, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Interesting.
And yeah.
Interesting. So let me ask you this. I just saw a post the other day on Twitter, and someone who's a good friend of ours in some of the work that we've done, Tyler J. McCall. I don't know if you're aware of him. He does stuff on Instagram. He's phenomenal. He's so creative and he's fun. And when you go on his Instagram, it's bright and cheery. And it was interesting. It just caught my attention because he posted on Twitter, what do you call it? What is the word for, I can't create anything. I'm tired all the time. Like, it was all this stuff that, and it went crazy on Twitter with all thousands of comments and all, that people were trying to figure it out, you know? And I think because so many people are in that boat right now.
Right.
So let me get your take on, is that something happening in the brain with all of the information that we're taking in and then trying to adapt to it? Is the brain shutting down at that point?
Well, it can, of course. You know, the brain is composed of a number of different parts. But we could, you know, for simplicity's sake, we could break the brain down into a primitive brain and a sophisticated, advanced brain. So the primitive brain essentially is responsible for keeping you alive, and it's the part of the brain that deals with threats to your survival. And you know, a lot of things can be perceived as threats.
Sure.
You know, the idea, I mean, the coronavirus can be perceived as a threat. It doesn't have to be, you know, a big lion stalking you. And so what happens when we feel that we are threatened is that at a subconscious level, at a primitive brain level, we go into what is popularly called a fight or flight response. And once that happens, once the primitive brain dominates brain function, essentially the cortex, which is the thinking part of the brain, the reasoning part of the brain, shuts off. It's like turning off the light switch.
Wow.
So we're in survival mode for real right now. Many people are feeling that, and that's what's happening in the brain.
Yeah, many people are. Many people are. Now, you know, when a brain is really well developed, you have the possibility of sort of, you know, checking yourself and then overriding that. Okay, but you know and I'm sure you know you've both experienced this. You know, you get some really bad news, okay, and all of a sudden you're sweating, your heart is racing, your blood pressure goes up, your breathing changes. None of that happens consciously. Your brain isn't saying, you know, your cortex is not saying to you, hey, I think you better breathe deeper. I think you better accelerate the heart rate. No, that all happens at a primitive brain level. So, you know, and all of this, there are good reasons for these things. Especially, you know, when we lived on the savannas and literally had
there were lions chasing us.
But you know, those things, you know, just because we happen to live in the atomic age doesn't mean that those things are not real for us. You know, from a genetic standpoint, in terms of our DNA is virtually unchanged since the time of our Paleolithic ancestors. So you know, so all of those same things apply.
So I think that it's important to just pause for 1 second and reiterate for folks that are watching and listening, because I know that there's so many people, because we are in the creative space. I mean, we're writers, we're speakers, and people really, when I saw his message, that, I mean, my Twitter feed I can go through real fast, and it just made me stop and saw all of these people that are in that space of, I feel like something is wrong. I felt like something was wrong with me for a few weeks. That why can't I? Am I depressed? Am I what? And here, okay, people, it's your brain. It is an actual physical reaction in your brain to, you have so much to consider. I think that's why I was having my little mini meltdowns too, because it was just too much. I'm sitting there worried about protecting the kids. Where do I shop? Can I shop? What do we do about their foods? And then everybody says, don't do processed foods. And that's what I feel like we should order. Be careful. Like all that stuff was just taking over, protecting the kids and all, that I couldn't create. And here it's literally a brain function. But you also mentioned that in our adult lives and in our developed brain, we have to tune into when to shut it off, when to make it stop and reset and stop spiraling down.
Right, exactly. And I think, you know, part of that is that, you know, you have to honestly look the devil in the eye, you know, and really recognize what it is that you're dealing with. And I think once you've done that, you can then set back and say, okay, you know, what are the resources that I've got at hand? Okay. What can I draw on here? And I think then, you know, you've looked at the beast, and you figured out, you know, okay, you know, well, you know, he doesn't look quite as threatening as I thought. You know, I could do this, I could do that, and so then you've got some, you know, some things that you can, you know, put your arms around. At social distancing, of course, but but you can put your arms around that, and that, you know, that helps to calm one down, and then you can start to think rationally about, okay, so this is what I'm dealing with. You know, how might I approach that? And then you've got some, you know, some possible solutions, and then as both of you have so wonderfully taught, then you can sort of take stock of what do you bring to the table in terms of, you know, your skills, your experience, et cetera. And then how can you use that in, as you said, Kristin, a creative way to forge ahead and move into a different future, perhaps, and hopefully a better future. You know, I think
I think one of the things that's striking me here is that we tend to, I always say our brains and our ability to think and reason, biggest blessing, biggest curse, because, you know, sometimes you you talk yourself into or out of things. But I guess what I'm getting from this is, if in these extraordinary circumstances we give ourselves enough grace to recognize that what we are feeling and experiencing is not only just emotional, but it also has a physiological impact on us.
Absolutely, sure.
That we can, like you said, then process it, look at it directly. And I mean, everything that you're saying goes right along with what we talk about with the reset, rise, and reveal thing. So, you know, that taking a look at it when you're down to the bare basics, that's when you take a look at it. And as you said, look the beast in the eye and really see what you're up against here. And to go back to what Chip said the other day, control the controllables,
Yeah.
our buddy. And then take your skill set and move forward. But it's almost comforting to me to hear you say that this is a physiological response and there's nothing wrong with you. This is how your brain is supposed to work.
Yes, of
right?
course. Yeah. And another thing is that, you know, we can't really separate physiology from emotion. That, you know, they're intimately intertwined. You know, the bottom line is that in the end, everything that happens in the brain boils down to brain biochemistry. And you know, when things are out of whack, biochemistry is out of whack too. And this is one of the reasons why you should avoid that junk food. And you should eat a good diet, because that helps. You know, we've got to take good care of this tool that we have, and because, you know, it's a real gift, and if we take good care of it, it works well. If we don't, if we abuse it, then we easily get into trouble. And so those things are very much intimately intertwined. You know, the human body works as a system. Everything affects everything else.
Yeah.
So would you say then, given these current circumstances, that I don't know if advise is the word, but just tell people to recognize the fact that this is natural. Don't let the fact that you feel uncomfortable freak you out, because you're supposed to feel uncomfortable. Just kind of ride with it and recognize that this is quite a normal response to everything that we're experiencing. And with a little bit of, you know, as you said, allowing the, I don't know, would the brain change through this for us? Like, would our brains change through this experience for us?
That's an absolutely wonderful question. And yes, the answer is yes. Our brains are always changing. Okay. Of course, the process, as you know, for you and me, for adults, is much slower than it is for children. But the brain's always evolving. And
so there's that opportunity to adapt even through this. I mean, this is a period of adaptation.
Absolutely.
So there's a really great one-liner for people to remember, especially me, when I start to hit that, oh my God, and all these things I can't control, to reset, that it's an opportunity to have my brain practice adapting.
There
This
you
is
go.
another opportunity to practice adapting.
That's a really good way to frame it. Yeah. And as I said, that's the hallmark of our species. You know, the human beings are the only species that lives literally on every part of the planet, and we've managed to do that and survive.
So you want to hear something funny? As we've been doing this for 2.5 whatever weeks now, as Mary Fran and I just dove into this with everybody, I keep saying that this is to serve all of you with helpful hints, and it has made me the most incredibly much stronger person and mom going through this with my 3 kids here, because I'm listening to the tips from everybody, and I go back to some of the interviews and trying to just maintain order here and nobody panicking and all that with all the stuff coming in. And just today, I sat with my kids before I went for a run, and I was talking to them about, okay, look, because everybody's starting to go, well, I don't have college and I don't have my internship and this is shutting down, and we tend to go into that whole, this is terrible again. And I said, I had with all 3 of them, each one of them, I found something that they can work on. Like my daughter, who's 15, there's not much that she can do right now, right? But I said, she's been wanting to get certified in babysitting. I'm like, see if someone's doing an online virtual
Good
treated
idea.
for babysitting. You
Exactly.
have another month that you're home. That is one goal. And my middle son, who's not impressed by anything, Mitchell, actually stopped. He looked at me and he goes, "That's brilliant." And he was dead serious. And I'm like, "What's today's date? What day
I was
is
just
it?
gonna say, mark this down,
Put
take
that on the
pictures.
fridge."
Yeah, you gotta get a sign made for that.
I'm like, "You guys should watch the Brilliantly Resilient show. It's pretty good."
It's pretty brilliant.
But that
So
was, it's like switching their minds into being productive and that brain and making those connections.
Yeah,
so you just said a word, Kristin, about order. So I kind of want to put that to you, Charles. Does the brain, when we're in this state of adapting, does it reorder things? Like, how does it, like, for what's going on, does it find a way to compartmentalize things? Does it find a new way to process information? Like, what's going on up there?
when the brain is functioning really well, yes. Okay. We talk in our line of work, we talk about neurological organization. So it's interesting that you honed in on that word. Really,
I need order. I just need it. I need to know what's happening.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we find consistently with people who have had brain injuries is that they do very poorly if they do not have routine, order, structure in their lives. And if you provide that for them, then they can succeed. Many years ago, I worked in a school with young adults who had neurological problems. These were all young people from 18 to 30 years of age. And the school was a boarding school, and we ran it literally like the Marine Corps. Okay. Everybody got up exactly the same time every day. Everybody did the same thing at the same time every day. It was very, very, very structured. And the reason for that is that when people have neurological issues, they have a great deal of difficulty when things are chaotic, and when things are structured, they have the opportunity to thrive. So one of the things that people can do as they sort of come to grips with all of this, is to kind of take a few deep breaths, pause, and then say, okay, how can I structure my day so that I can do something productive with all of this time that I've got? In much the same way that you both have sort of taken your plans to go on the road in the fall and accelerated them and be of service now, we are very much doing the same thing at the Reach Family Institute and Brain Fit Kids, the two sort of branches of our work. And we are, within the next couple of weeks, we'll be rolling out a whole bunch of things to support families who suddenly find themselves at home with the kids. And so many people are just lost. They have no idea what to do. And we've spent 45 years guiding families to do things with their kids at home. I mean, our program is a home program. So we've got a lot of experience with that. And so we're going to be making a lot of things available through this magnificent medium of the internet.
So that's a good segue into where can people tune in and find you and get those activities and get in touch with you for stuff like that?
Yeah, well, first of all, they can go to our website, which is www.reachfamilyinstitute, altogether, lowercase, .org, O-R-G. And then the other website is www.brainfitkids, altogether, lowercase, .com.
Awesome.
So we'll have lots of stuff on those sites, and families can certainly email us at admin@reachfamilyinstitute.org. We offer free consultations, short consultations for families who are concerned about their children, whether those concerns are, gee, I wonder if he's, where he's supposed to be, or I've gotten a diagnosis and I know that there's a big problem. so that families can, so that we can learn about what their issues are, and give them a little bit of guidance, and then they can learn about what we have to offer to them.
And what was that at Reach Family Institute, the email? What was the first word?
Admin.
Admin. Okay.
ADMIN.
Admin.
Yeah.
Great.
And of course, now we're out of necessity, we're doing consultations online.
Sure.
We spent 20 hours, as I said, 20 hours last week with a family in Lithuania.
That's awesome. I love the work that you do, and it's so important. And I know we don't have time to go into it. I want people to go check you guys out and see the success stories, because when we talked at lunch about the impact that you've had on families and kids, it really, it's brilliant, but it really was extraordinary, the stuff that you're doing. I'm so happy that you came in and given us peace of mind. How do you like that for a pun?
Truly.
But really, peace of mind at least for me, I go into this better knowing that it really is a function of my brain that is supposed to be there to kind of freak out a little bit, and that takes over, and then take a breath and ease in to the rise. So I so appreciate your work.
And it's great that you brought up mind, because if I were to boil down what we do in literally one sentence, it's that we teach parents how to parent with the brain in mind.
Oh, I like that.
Perfect ending.
Oh, you're clever. That was a perfect ending.
All right, Charles, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody go in and check out those websites. I'll put the links in when I redo the post here on Facebook, and then it's been recorded, and you'll see it up on YouTube, and you can share away. Thanks so much, Charles.
Okay, Kristin, Mary, Fran, thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
Much. God bless. Stay healthy.
You too. Have a good one.